You're listening to Two Girls, One Crossword.
I am really glad that it's silent today because yesterday there was an incessant buzzing. It was like my building was shaking all day, and then at 6:20 it stopped. I was like, okay, if it comes back tomorrow, maybe it'll be done by the time we record. But it was like a van outside that was just, I don't know what it was doing. I thought it was like the neighbors. Yes, but it was so, I can't explain to you how loud it was. I was like going a little bit crazy because it was in my head. I could like feel it on my desk. It was vibrating. And I texted my neighbor. I was like, have you just heard buzzing all day? And he was like, yes.
That's actually insane to think about. We had construction happening in the unit above us, and they were doing something like sanding the floor or something that is just like, it's not just a noise, but it's like a sound wave, and you can feel the sound wave. You know what I also hate? When you have like a Amazon truck parked outside or a UPS, and sometimes they like leave their backup beeper just on as they run packages throughout the neighborhood, and it's just that low like beep beep beep, and I'm like, is something going off in the apartment? Is my microwave? Is that the carbon monoxide? You know, like what's going on? Is it the fire alarm? Like what is this? My alarm? No.
It gets in your brain and then it leaves and you still hear it. That's why I'm like, wait, is it buzzing? No, it's not buzzing. I swear it was from like 9 a.m. until 6:30. It was awful. Anyways,
it must have been some sort of machine inside of like a van. They might have been doing some sort of process. I have no idea what I'm talking about.
They had to have been doing some type of maintenance thing, or who knows? I mean, maybe it was like an attack on my ears.
Yeah, they were like, let's get her, boys.
It did feel personal.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'm glad that that's over with, so we can be here recording this episode in total silence.
Although, okay, you know, things are happening in my life, which means I'm watching my dog alone at night more frequently, which means we may hear some barking, just like we did last episode. I think that made it in. So I just want to remind everybody that we do sometimes have a guest appearance here. Speaking of silence, my dog is often not silent. Okay.
Is he silent or silenced?
Silenced. Exactly. Oh, that was a cultural reset. Okay, in terms of interviews. Just gotta say.
Shout out to Oprah.
Shout out.
If you care about interviews, this is kind of an interview of sorts. We interview each other.
Oh my God, we tell each other like our deepest, darkest secrets live on this podcast. Yeah.
Which is called Two Girls, One Crossword. We didn't intro it yet.
Nice.
I'm Grace Topinka.
And I'm Chelsea Rowan, and we're the queen of segues, the queens of segues. You're welcome. This is, in fact, your favorite weekly Podword Crosscast, which was a bad segue, but I will come back. I'll do another one. Just give me some time.
We're smooth, baby. Like, I'm going to say, should we go into Polsapalooza? How about that for a segue? Never heard that before on this podcast.
We're doing so well today. I want to reaffirm just how well we're doing. So I say, let's segue and let's do the polls. The singular poll. What do we got?
Beautiful. I could say, I mean, we are doing well. It could be worse. There could be like a extremely loud buzzing noise the entire time I'm talking.
It's true.
We asked our Twitter followers, which Oktoberfest food are you ordering? Potential options were bretzel, the Weisswurst, which was the white sausage, the Schwein. I also don't speak German, shockingly. The Schweinschocks, which is pork knuckle, which is not pork rinds. It's more like
a pork knuckle.
Yeah, it's like just a piece of meat with a bone hanging out of it. It looks good though. Mm-hmm. And then spatzel, which is like white pasta.
With egg.
Yes. Struggled with the emojis a little bit there.
I thought that was really, really, you did such a good job with the emojis.
Well, because not only do I have to find emojis for these things, but it's like, you can only use like 4 letters in these polls. You know,
ridiculous,
the character limit is really small. So
they're really throttling us here on Twitter.
Exactly. Well, but the only spaghetti emoji had tomato sauce. So I'm sorry about that.
That feels like cultural appropriation to me.
Agreed. All right, well, this won by a landslide. I'll say, first of all, nobody voted for the white wiener.
Okay. I called it on the episode last week. It just feels it's like oddly phallic in a really offensive way.
It's just the color is very off-putting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, just because we're not used to that here, I'm sure in Germany, people are like, what are you talking about? This isn't like
they're probably
totally
drooling
normal.
over white sausage in Germany. We're not here.
I'm sure it tastes delish. But in third and fourth place, we had 7% for the Spatzel and 8% for the Schweinschocks, and then 85% took the lead Bretzel, of course.
I'm with you. I'm with our listeners. I'm with our voters, okay? I really love soft pretzels. I went on a rant about them last episode. If you're interested in my soft pretzel rants, please listen to episode 90. Yeah, that's just how I feel. Pretzels for life, okay?
I agree, especially the cheese. Although I will say, one time I ordered a Bretzel type of situation at a Renaissance fair, and it was like, I don't know if it was like a loaded Bretzel or something. I thought it was going to be filled with cheese. I took a big old bite out of it, and there was a whole like hot dog in the middle. I was like, thank God I'm not a vegetarian.
Was it a Weisswurst?
No. That would have been truly shocking. It was like a corn dog pretzel. But, you know,
Speak about offensive.
I feel like the menu didn't really, prepare me for that. It wasn't clear that that's what I was ordering. But, I mean, it was fine. It still tasted
good, right? But, like, I feel like if you're going into a situation thinking you're getting a pretzel and you take a bite and there's a sauce, like a wiener in it, like...
Yeah.
Okay, hopes and dreams dashed officially. So
it was certainly a shock to the system.
Oh, I want to eat a pretzel. I should, you know what? Okay, Grace, every time that Matt and I make pretzels, we always have leftovers and like we never eat them fast enough. So we should make them next time that I see you so that you can come over and eat with us some of these pretzels, because I think like we get 8 out of a recipe, and we can probably, honestly, I could probably eat 4 in a day, but I try to like not make myself feel sick to the stomach. So I'll eat like 1.5, maybe 2, like on the day that we make the pretzels. But we always have some left over, and the second day they're just not good enough. Even like 2 or 3 hours later, they just don't pack that same punch. So I'll try to make some next time fresh. You come over. Yeah.
All right, I'm down to eat your pretzels. I saw on Twitter someone was like, if Auntie Anne's closed down all of their mall locations and opened up as a drive-through, they would be constantly busy.
Game over. I would get a car.
I'd get a car. I don't even have a car.
I would get a car for
somehow. Zip car every night.
Yeah. I'd come and pick you up and be like, get in, loser. We're getting pretzels. Anyway,
we can dream.
Shall we move on? I guess. Shall we move on?
Let's move on to heights and shites.
All right. Can I get us started off?
Sure.
Okay. So we received some, I'm going to say fan mail. Some mail from a fan, from a listener. I guess listener mail. I guess I'm not going to just say that you're a fan. But we get an email, right? Okay. From this guy. Right? His name is Matthew Freed. Thanks for writing again, Matthew. It's great to hear from you. Matthew asked, or he kind of showed a little bit of surprise that we hadn't covered a specific puzzle last week. The Sunday New York Times puzzle by Joe DiPietro. It was themed Shot in the Dark. I actually had been intending to talk about that puzzle last week, but sometimes Grace and I, we just... the episode gets away from us and time is ticking, etc. And we really just need to fast forward into our topics because we don't want our episodes to be 3 hours long. So I didn't get to talk about it, but I will talk about it now since it does seem, the puzzle seemed to have, caused quite a stir in the cross world. Did you do this puzzle? I don't think you do the Sundays that often.
I don't think I did. I saw people talk about it on Twitter and I was just I can't get involved in this drama today.
Too much drama. Right. So the puzzle is from Sunday, May 6th. It's from Joe DiPietro. It's from New York Times. The Sunday puzzle is kind of like a reset puzzle before you head back into your easy Mondays. It's not the Sunday puzzles are not like simple. It's not like a Monday, but it's also not like a Saturday either. I like doing the Sunday puzzles because they're bigger. You can take a nice long time doing it while you're eating your breakfast. And it's still challenging enough. There tends to be a nice theme, whatever. Let me just say, this puzzle's theme was so dense and, in my personal opinion, tricky that it made the solving of the Sunday miserable. I just got to say, I didn't really have that much fun. That being said, I also think the theme was kind of creative, but maybe better used on a different day. You know, just, I wasn't necessarily going into a Sunday trying to like use my brain a lot, and I had to use my brain quite a lot. So let me just get into it. The theme, like I said, oh, go ahead.
I feel like these constructors can't win. It's either like we've seen this theme a million times, or then this theme's too complicated. It's just like, come on. I
know. I'm not trying to crap on Joe. I'm not trying to crap on Joe, but I do have to say that it was really challenging for a Sunday. And maybe they're trying to do something new. I don't actually know. I mean, I'm not on the editorial staff at the New York Times Crossword, but maybe they're trying to do something new. I did like the theme. It was just hard. Okay. The theme was shot in the dark. The two theme revealers were 23 across and 127 across, and they were clued as shot in the dark, and the answers were uneducated guess and last-ditch effort, respectively. Essentially, there were hidden rebuses in black squares throughout the puzzle, okay? And so the acrosses and downs that crossed that black rebus square had a word in their answers that could be used with the word shot. So, for instance, flu shot or rim shot. That word flu or rim would be a rebus in one of the black squares in the crossword. It was a shot, a type of shot, a flu shot, in the dark, a dark square. Mm-hmm. But the way that the puzzle was kind of constructed and the way that the clues were put in, and I also think it didn't help that I was solving in an app, so I didn't get to see how the puzzle looked on paper, and you don't get to see all the clues all at once. So it was kind of difficult. You didn't know you were hitting a theme answer until much later. At least for me, I had to go through the puzzle 2 or 3 times to realize what the theme answers were. Anyway, so I'm going to give you some answers. 4 down. Tools for landscapers. And this was paired with 55 down. 55 down was just a dash, okay? So 4 down sat over top 55 down and was separated by a black square. The answer to 4 down was Hedget, hedget. I was like, what? And the answer to 55 down was MERS. And I'm like, what the heck could this possibly be? Tools for landscapers. Then I realized that there was letters missing, and the answer was hedge trimmers. And the missing letters spelled RIM, so rim as in rim shot, shot in the dark. Mm-hmm. And that was down. Across there was 43 across, fix for a bald spot, which was paired with 56 across, dash. And the answer was hair implant, but the missing letters were RIM, so rim. So the 43 across answer was HAI, and 46 across answer was PLANT, and that rebus that kind of separated them was rim, as in rim shot.
Got it. Well,
and there was a lot of those.
Seems easy once you explain it.
Once you figure out what's going on, it's easy. But Matt and I realized that the answers were jumping squares, but we didn't understand how it was related to the theme until we answered like quite a few of them. I think there is maybe 7 or so of these, or maybe 6 or so. It was tricky, but yeah. Anyway, that was that. It was a tough one. It stumped us for a while, and just got to say, I used my brain in a way I wasn't expecting to on a Sunday morning over eggs and coffee.
No less.
Yes, on a Sunday, no less. So thanks, Matthew, for writing. Always love hearing from you. And that's my take. That's my hot take.
Well, yeah, I can see how that would be difficult.
True facts.
On a much lighter note,
okay.
I did the Waypo Sunday on May 23rd by Evan Bernholz. And I just want to say, Cats shows up again, 72 down, musical with Monk Strap and Old Deuteronomy.
Cats. Cats the musical.
Cats is becoming like an inside joke now amongst crossword constructors, I believe.
It's like a
that's what I'm
secret
gonna tell
message.
myself.
Yeah. It's how we communicate with each other across crossword grids.
Another one I wanted to talk about was the New York Times, Wednesday, May 26th by Will Nediger. I liked the cluing for 22 across. The answer was man, which isn't anything that special, but the clue was Shania Twain's blank, I feel like a woman.
Yes.
Loved that. And I learned something new in that puzzle. 49 down, scooter brand whose name means wasp. It's Vespa.
Ah.
I didn't know that.
Okay. I didn't know that either, and I love learning things like that. I really do. Speaking of things that I learned, I'm going to go back to that New York Times puzzle from 2 weeks ago or whatever, the 16th, the Sunday. 59 across Hasbro game requiring increasingly quick reflexes. And the answer was Bop It, which, I mean, I think Grace and I were in that age range where we grew up with Bop It, and we grew up with the different renditions of Bop It. You know, you had the traditional one, which is the three, like, bop it, twist it, pull it. And then, you know, they came out with, like, the pro one that has, like, flick it, whatever, twist
I
it.
had both.
Yeah.
Not to brag, but
Okay. But I feel like I saw somewhere, maybe it was on the Rex Parker blog, that he didn't know what Bop It was. And I was like, how do people not know what Bop It is? And for anybody out there that doesn't know what Bop It is, if you just missed that, you're just a little too old, a little too young. The Bop It creator actually is like kind of viral on TikTok. You can follow him. Bop It Inventor. It's like at Bop It Inventor is the handle. He explains the history behind the invention and other things he's invented over the course of his career. It's super interesting. There's a lot more there than you might think. Okay.
didn't he invent like a bunch of weird remote controls?
Yes,
and
like
one was like a
one.
slice of pizza.
Yes.
People are like, you need to sell this because I would buy this now.
Exactly. Yeah. So I hope that he gets the respect he deserves, because Bop It was a really important part of my childhood. So
Very annoying for parents around the world, I'm sure.
yes. But they had us, so they got to deal with it. So
Yeah.
What else you got?
I liked the theme of the Monday, May 24th by Adrian Atkins.
Agreed. This was nice.
It was 61 across. The revealer was stand-in during a film shoot, or hint to 4 other clues, and it was body double.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, 17 across was harmonica, which was mouth organ. Sorry, my cat just tried to jump into my lap. 25 across, place to get some barbecue, rib joint. Oh, so yeah, mouth organ, both body parts, rib joint, both body parts.
Mm-hmm.
38 across, dummy, knuckle, head. And then 51 across, negative repercussions, back, lash. Now, is an eyelash a body part? I guess. I mean,
Is a joint
it's
a
not.
body part?
I feel like a joint is more of a body part than an eyelash.
I feel like a joint is the combination of 2 body parts. Is it in itself?
Well-
Can you have your cake and eat it too? Okay.
Well, like, yeah, I mean, hair, because, like, your hair is constantly falling off of you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my body parts are all over my pillow. Like, just feels wrong.
I know. You don't say I'm going to crack my body parts. You say I'm going to crack my knuckles.
I do.
Oh, sorry.
Iliac crest. That was the answer this month, and I knew it for sure. Shout out to my chiropractor videos that I watch.
Oh, God. Did you do the Friday, May 21st New Yorker by Robin Weintraub?
I may have.
There's some good ones in here. 14 across, it's freezing, exclamation point. And the answer was ice machine, which just, not to talk about ice machines, but Grace and I have talked about ice machines semi-recently and about how lovely good ice is. Specifically, I'm watching like these TikToks where people make drinks, right? And their ice looks just so good. It like hits different. Like it scratches this itch that I didn't even know I freaking had. And I want like a beautiful ice maker just to sit on my countertop to make like perfectly shaped ice cubes.
Well, I feel like the Coke Freestyle machines have really good ice.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, it's that tube ice that then it's like little pieces of, it like cuts up the frozen tubes. But
Right.
on TikTok, they have tiny ice cube trays that are like little sugar cube ice, smaller than that even. But I feel like in practice, that's probably very annoying because,
Right.
like, I assume when you pop them out, they just get everywhere, and then you have tiny ice cube. You know, it's just
Right.
it's too much.
Well, have you seen the ice ones that are like, it's like a cup and you fill it with ice and then you can squeeze the cup and they all break into the cup?
Yes, I've actually heard that that doesn't work as well
Oh, okay.
because it's really annoying to get the thing. If you don't think I've looked into that, I'm obsessed with ice water. If I feel like we may have talked about that before.
She loves her ice
Or
water.
maybe that always gets left on the cutting room floor. I often, jingle my ice water bottle around between topics.
She loves her ice. I have learned my lesson. She's come over before and been like, "Do you have any ice?" And I like pull out like my 7 ice trays and they're all empty and I'm like, "Oh shit, I'm so sorry." So I have since learned to keep my ice stocked up, especially if Grace is in town,
And I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Also from that puzzle, 36 across, revolutionary painting, ? The answer was spin art. So like something you would do at like camp. I think that was really nice.
I'm familiar.
3 down, like many gas stations and frozen yogurt shops. And the answer was self-serve. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because I was born and raised in New Jersey, where like we don't pump our gas. So if you've seen like on the highway, like Jersey girls don't pump gas. Like that is like what I was raised in. And moving away to college, I went to college in Connecticut. One of the rudest awakenings was learning how to pump my own gas with no one to teach me as a frightened 18-year-old. Truly.
That's rough.
Horrifying to like pull up to a gas station. Nobody's coming out. And I'm just sitting there like, what is going on? Anyway, I'm since not as afraid, but I love going to New Jersey and they just walk up to the window and you say 20 cash regular and you're Gucci.
See, for me, I feel like that would confuse. I wouldn't know how to do that. Well, also, I mean, we don't drive. Like, I haven't had a car in 10 years. So I haven't had to fill up gas regularly in a while. One time I was in a gas station in, like, rural California, and you had to go in and then ask them to, like, put money on a certain pump. And I was like, I'm like, okay, how much? I was like, I don't know.
How much? How do you know how much to
This
put
is a
in your
rental
car?
I don't even know, Anyways, I'm sure I made them laugh with my ineptitude. It's not my fault. We're city girls. Okay.
We're city girls. The last one from that puzzle, I think you're going to love this one. 7 down. Dick, but longer.
Richard?
Yes. The clue is amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
I love it so much. Anyway, that's what I got. What else you got for me?
That's it, actually.
Oh, that's it, actually. Okay. I think that's fine for me, too. I'm good to move on.
Move on with our lives? All right. Well,
Yeah.
flip the coin then.
Ooh, don't tell me what to do. But I will flip the coin, though. I think I need to do that. All right, are you ready? I'm flipping
ready.
the coin now. It's tails.
Me?
Grace is
Back
back,
to my
everyone.
former glory. My topic comes from the Monday New York Times puzzle, May 24th, by Adrian Atkins, and it is 11 down. One's leading the blind, maybe.
Seeing eye dogs. I knew you were going to do this topic this week. I knew it.
Well, you didn't know it because it's service dogs.
Oh, shit. Okay, I gotta go, everyone. I'm canceled.
Yes. Yes, my topic is, in fact, on service dogs. I will be talking about seeing eye dogs or guide dogs. So in episode 72, Old Dog, New Tricks, we talked about how dogs evolved to be domesticated and how over time humans began breeding them for specific human needs like hunting, security, social status, etc. But when did humans start using service dogs? Or dogs as service aids? So the earliest evidence of a service dog was found among the ruins of an ancient Roman city, Herculaneum. This was in the 1st century AD. There is a painting of a blind man being led by his dog. So it goes way back. Mm-hmm. And there are also similar depictions in Chinese scroll paintings from the Middle Ages.
Damn. Okay.
So, shout out to dogs for always helping us out. The first systematic instruction of guide dogs was introduced in 1750 in Paris at a hospital for the blind. Decades later, an Austrian man named Joseph Riesinger trained his dog so well that people accused him of faking blindness. Another Austrian, Johann Wilhelm Klein, published one of the first manuals for training guide dogs in 1819, and the dog breeds he recommended were poodles and shepherds, German shepherds, and he advocated for the use of a special harness paired with a pole, which is similar to what is still used today. But the modern guide dog movement, as we know it today, started in Germany, and this is because after World War I, a lot of German soldiers were left blinded by mustard gas, so there was a huge need for guide dogs specifically.
Interesting.
So, yeah, before it was kind of piecemeal, like all over, dogs were trained here and there, but this was like the first big movement.
Mm-hmm.
So the man who pioneered this in Germany was a German doctor called Gerhard Stalling. And Stalling was the president of the German Ambulance Association, which during the war, they had trained a bunch of border collies to track down wounded soldiers and also like carry messages between people. So the story goes that one day after the war, he was at the hospital and he had left his German shepherd, like his own personal pet, with a blind patient while he did rounds at the hospital. And then when he came back, he realized that his dog had become very protective of the patient, of the veteran. So Stalling saw potential, and in 1916, he asked like the people who trained the ambulance dogs to, find wounded soldiers. He asked them to retrain them to help blind veterans.
Oh, okay.
So this organization went on for a decade, and in 1923, the German Shepherd Dog Association opened a training center in Potsdam and produced 4,000 guide dogs for veterans and civilians by 1930.
Wow.
This school in Germany caught the eye of Dorothy Harrison Eustace, who was a rich American woman. She had bred and trained dogs for the Swiss Army. I don't know why,
Okay.
because she's American, but whatever. But after observing a guide dog in action, she wrote a long article about it in the newspaper in the US, and she was endorsing the German Shepherd, and she was basically saying how, guide dogs can help bring independence to visually impaired people or blind people.
Mm-hmm.
So Morse Frank, who was a blind 19-year-old from Tennessee, wrote Eustace a letter after her article came out saying, quote, "Thousands of blind like me abhor being dependent on others. Help me and I will help them. Train me and I will bring my dog and show people here how a blind man can be absolutely on his own."
Ah.
And that's exactly what Frank did.
Okay.
He went to Switzerland and returned with his new guide dog, Buddy. So Buddy was the first American guide dog.
Ooh, Buddy. Such an American name for a guide dog, too.
Yeah. He got a lot of attention for this guide dog in America, and in 1929, Frank, this 19-year-old, and Eustace, they opened up the first American guide dog school in the U.S. called the Seeing Eye. And then 5 years later, the Guide Dogs for the Blind Association was founded in England. So it was like at this time, it was starting to become very official. Like in the decades that would follow, training centers opened up around the world. There were multiple training centers opening up in the U.S. And today, assistance dogs help out with like a variety of challenges, not just guide dogs. So according to akc.org, the different types of service dogs are: 1, the guide dogs, who help blind and visually impaired individuals navigate their environments. And then there are hearing dogs, and these help alert deaf and hard of hearing individuals to important sounds. There's mobility dogs that assist individuals who use wheelchairs, walking devices, and who have balance issues. There's medical alert dogs, who might signal the onset of a medical issue, such as a seizure or low blood sugar. They can alert the user to the presence of allergens and a myriad of other functions. That is like the craziest to me.
It's insane to me. They can like smell your low blood sugar.
Yeah.
It's like insane.
And then there's psychiatric service dogs, which assist individuals with disabilities such as OCD, which you've talked about, PTSD, schizophrenia, and other conditions. So examples of work done by a psychiatric service dog could include entering a room, turning on a light, or entering a dark room and turning on a light to kind of mitigate the stress of that situation, interrupting repetitive behaviors, and reminding a person to take medication.
Oh my God, dogs are amazing.
I know. We love a working dog.
We love them.
Okay, so some facts about service dogs. And this
Give me
is
the facts.
This is from the AKC, which is American Kennel Club. There is no breed specifications for a service dog, but obviously size has to be appropriate to the task. For example, like a Papillon is not appropriate for like a mobility dog that's supposed to pull a wheelchair, but it could be used as like a hearing dog because, they could be really alert.
Mm-hmm.
The most common breeds trained as guide dogs are Labrador Retrievers, Golden Retrievers, and German Shepherds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised poodles are not on there. They
That is
used to
kind of
be
surprising.
top of the list. I mean, I still see poodle guide dogs. There's one on our commute.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah. There is a specific organization that maintains breeding standards for labs and retrievers called Canine Companions for Independence, Inc. So everything is very buttoned up.
Yeah.
Some dogs are sold or donated from purebred breeders, but I thought this was really cute. Sometimes really high energy dogs, who are really high energy and super alert, they're selected from rescue groups and, shelters to be trained as hearing dogs.
Oh.
So I feel like Peanut, before she went deaf, which is my family's miniature wiener dog, could have been good at that because she hears any sound she will alert you to. Well, actually, no, she can't be trained because she's not very smart. But
well, my dog could probably be one of those sniffer ones that can sniff out an allergen or something.
Yeah.
Or a hearing dog because, I had him on a walk today and this dog heard a kid cry 3 blocks away and he was on alert the whole rest of the walk, would not focus, just kept listening for that crying child. Anyway.
Yeah, she got him a job at the airport.
It's true.
And then contrary to popular belief, a service dog is not required to wear a vest by the ADA.
Okay.
And in fact, many dogs who do wear vests aren't actual service dogs.
Okay.
So what makes a dog an actual official service dog? According to the ADA, a service dog is trained to take a specific action whenever required to assist a person with their disability. The task the dog performs is directly related to their person's disability.
Mm.
So that brings me to ESAs, or emotional support animals.
Right.
So ESAs often wear vests, but they aren't service dogs. They aren't allowed access to public facilities under the law. However, some states have now allowed them to get some, access to places that otherwise animals wouldn't be allowed. Therapy dogs and courthouse dogs are also not considered service dogs.
Okay.
Even though we do love them. So, therapy dog, they go to hospitals and schools, and courthouse dogs often accompany children when they have to go to court as a comfort thing.
Sure.
Not officially service dogs. Okay, I'll talk more about ESAs later.
Okay.
If you want to find a service dog, your best bet would be to get one from a professional service dog training organization. And the training is so rigorous that the dropout rate is 50 to 70%.
I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah. And there is a long line to adopt the dogs that, don't make it past training. The cost of training a service dog can exceed $25,000. That includes training for the owner, because the owner also has to get trained with the dog, and follow-ups. Mm-hmm. And training can take 18 months to a couple of years.
Wow. For the human or for the dog, or both?
For the dog.
Oh, yeah.
Some organizations provide service dogs for free or offer financial aids, and then others charge fees. So yeah, a service dog can cost tens of thousands of dollars. It's really hard to get one, and it could be a really long waiting list to get one as well.
Oh, that's really upsetting, actually.
Yeah. One organization called Canine Assistance, they will train a dog, and then they use extensive personality tests to identify 12 to 14 individuals that could maybe be compatible with this dog. And then they have a 2-week training camp where the dogs interact with these individuals, and then they finally make the final selection for the dog. And they say usually you could tell, the dog just has a connection with someone.
Yeah.
The ADA does not require service dogs to be professionally trained. So individuals with disabilities do have the right to train a service dog on their own. They're not required to use a professional training program, but obviously, it's really hard to train a dog, especially if you need them to do a lot of different really intricate tasks.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
So I still think there's a lot of barrier to entry there. If it's not obvious that a dog is a service dog, that's not wearing a service dog vest, there are only 2 questions that a business or public entity can ask, according to the ADA. The questions are, 1, is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? And 2, what work or task has the dog been trained to perform?
Okay.
So obviously you can't be asking someone what their disability is.
Right, of course.
And that's not for the public. That's if you, own a public space.
Sure.
Or a private space.
Mm-hmm.
And how should the rest of us lay people who don't own spaces, how should we act around service dogs?
Tell me.
The number one most important thing to remember is to ignore them completely. So the dogs are working. They're sometimes doing life-saving work. They can sense like if a seizure is going to come on. So any distractions can be dangerous. Do not look at it. Don't make eye contact. Don't point at them. Don't take pictures of them. Definitely don't make little kissy noises. Don't ask their owners if you can pet them. Yes, they're cute, but you just have to completely ignore them.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And leave them alone. However, if you see a service dog without a human, it might be trying to get your attention because some service dogs are trained that if their human, passes out or is otherwise incapacitated, the dog is trained to go find someone else for help.
Oh.
So if you see a service dog with no human, just follow it. See, where it takes you.
Oh,
where it takes you.
They're working so hard. They're trying so hard to do their jobs.
I know. And they love it too. Okay. The epidemic of fake service dogs.
Oh, no.
So this was an article in theguardian.com called "The Number of Fake Emotional Support Dogs is Exploding. Why?" by Adrian Mate. So basically, service dogs and their owners are protected and they're given special accommodations by federal laws, but a lot of times these accommodations are abused by people who have fake service dogs. And the problem with ESAs is that a lot of times their bad behavior reflects on official service dogs. There's a quote from the article. In 2018, Delta Air reported an 84% surge in animal incidents since 2016, including urination, defecation, and biting. Recent media reports of emotional support peacocks causing pandemonium in airports, comfort hamsters getting flushed in a frenzy, and dogs storming the stage during Cats, the musical, have further contributed to the sense that ESAs are an epidemic, part of a zoo where entitlement, biting, pooping, and pretty much anything else goes.
Mm-hmm.
So this article interviewed a man named Ryan Honeck. He's 33 years old. He uses a service Labrador named Pico. And Honeck says that despite having federal protections for his dog, he's often denied access to places and also rides from ride-sharing drivers. This is a quote from him. Quote, "I've had drivers ask me point blank, what happens when your dog defecates in my car? I've said that's not how trained service dogs function. People's perceptions get skewed because somebody brought in their misrepresented animal. And that makes it hard for people like me who have a legitimately trained dog like Pico who's never caused any problems because there's this wariness."
Yeah.
So Honeck keeps a running thread of these types of, issues that he runs into on Twitter. And he wants to make sure people know the difference between like a $20,000 super dog that can smell oncoming seizures and lead the blind versus a pet that, quote, doesn't actively sabotage its owner's mental health.
Right. Oh.
Honeck also says, quote, "The easiest giveaway is behavior. A trained service animal is going to behave unobtrusively and professionally. If those things aren't happening, odds are the animal is fraudulent."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the rise of ESAs is kind of complicated, and that's what this article kind of goes into because, yes, they do ruin things for service animals and, most importantly, service animals' owners. But studies show that ESAs can actually reduce anxiety, and of course anxiety is higher than ever because the world is burning, and why wouldn't it be?
Right.
So what's the solution? The article suggests that either one, you make the world a more pet-friendly place with more accommodations for pets, or two, you make it harder to get a pet signed up as an ESA to weed out the people who are just doing it for convenience, because there are definitely a lot of people who do it just for convenience because
they want it in their apartment or something like that, which is
or they don't want to pay for it on the plane, or they want to be able to take it in the cabin.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think ESAs can be useful, but I also think people just need to be more educated on the protections that legitimate service dogs have. And I actually follow a couple different influencers who use service dogs, and they've talked about this a lot, that sometimes they can't get into restaurants. Ubers is like a huge issue, and they can't not have their dog with them because that's part of their lifeline. Right.
And I mean, I feel like, yes, if you have an animal that really does like help your anxiety or whatever, your ESA, like, okay. But you also have to be aware of like the ramifications of what you're doing if your dog isn't behaving properly. Like, it has actual legitimate health consequences for people, like, not to say that their health issues are worse than your anxiety, whatever, but like, let's be honest here, someone's seizure is a little bit more important than whether or not you're a little anxious about being on a plane without your dog. I don't know.
Yes, it's definitely complicated. There is a hierarchy of, importance of the work of the dog. But some interesting things or cute things I came across in my research, some stories about service dogs that I'll share.
Please.
Is there was this couple, there was two people, a man and a woman, and they went to like a training dog facility to get matched with a dog and do like, the 2 weeks of training there. And their dogs were friends at the facility, so then they kind of became friends, and then they ended up like falling in love and getting married, and the dogs were their ring bearers at their wedding.
No.
And I thought that was really cute.
Oh, wow, that is just the cutest thing ever.
And then another interesting fact that I know, because I'm weird and I love to go down these, YouTube rabbit holes, but so a service dog obviously can't work forever. I mean, they do retire. And you can usually tell it's time for retirement because they don't get excited to put on their vest. A lot of times, owners, I believe, like from what I've learned from a couple of these people that I watch, that when they put like the vest on the dog, then the dog knows, okay, now I'm working. And they're usually really excited to put the vest on.
Right.
But, once they get to a certain age, they may not be as excited. So that's when it's time to retire them, or, if they keep making mistakes and stuff. But when they retire, they can't live with their owner because it'll be too confusing for them.
Yeah. Oh my God, my heart.
Yeah. So a lot of times they end up going to a family member or something, so maybe they could still see them, but they can't live full time with the owner.
Wow. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I'm just thinking about my dog. How he has like the makings of the qualities that you would want in a good service animal, but he's also bad shit. So
I feel like he's too food motivated. He's not like owner please, like he doesn't care about pleasing owners. He would definitely be more suited to like sniffing out stuff, I think.
You're right. Yes. He'd be very good at like at the airport. Something where if he does really well, he'll get a good reward. He's not an excitable dog, could you imagine putting a work vest on him and him getting excited to work? He's not that type of dog. He's very, when is the next food going to fall on the ground? Motivated.
Yeah, he doesn't really get excited. Even about food, he's like, give me that food. But he's not, he doesn't care about being a good boy, like none of that.
He doesn't. It's when I love this dog. He gets so excited when people come over, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or like,
yeah, that's the only time I've seen him like
get excited. But
super excited.
He wags his tail like if you're going to come up to like pet him, but as soon as you touch him, he stops wagging his tail. He's like very serious. He's like, this is all business. And as soon as you take your hand off, he's wagging his tail again. It's like, what? You're sending me mixed signals here? Like, what do you want from me? He's like, food. Actually, I want food.
He's like, I thought you were coming over here with a treat, but you were just petting me. How dare you?
Yeah.
Well, that's all I got.
Very lovely. I love that. Oh, I love seeing service dogs out in public doing their jobs. They're such good boys and girls. Yes.
But don't look at them. Oh my gosh. One time I was at the airport and there was a man there with his service dog. He had a vest and everything. And we were going through TSA and we were like on the other side, like everyone was getting their luggage. And there was a woman who kept being like, aw, like making that to the service dog.
Do you live under a rock?
And I want to be like, lady, what are you doing? I think like the man's wife eventually says something to her like,
he's working.
Leave him alone. But
yeah.
I mean, don't go up to the owner and ask him if you can pet the dog. I know it's tempting, but
just don't do it.
Because you imagine they have this dog with them all the time. You imagine they get that constantly.
I know. God, that would drive me up a wall. I'd be such a cranky grump. I'd be like, get the fuck away from my dog. My topic comes from the Wednesday, May 26th New Yorker by Amy Lucido. 12 down, gorilla, watcher, Fosse. The answer is Dion. Okay. Do you know who Dion Fosse is?
No. I remember this clue, I think.
Okay. I didn't know who this person was at all. I'd never heard of them before. I'm much more familiar with, like, Jane Goodall.
I was going to say, that's the only gorilla watcher I know.
Right. And Jane Goodall does chimpanzees. That's the difference. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But as the clue suggests, Dian Fosse has a long history with gorillas, specifically mountain gorillas in Rwanda. But I don't want to spoil anything. So let's just get into it because we're just buckle up. More animal stuff. Here we go. So Diane Fossey was born in San Francisco in 1932 to George and Kitty Fossey. Her parents divorced when she was really young, and her mother remarried. Fossey started her college career in 1949 at Marin Junior College. Her stepfather basically made her study business, and she hated it. She eventually dropped out of Marin and went to study at the University of California as a pre-veterinary med student. She did well in the zoology and botany courses, but the more challenging courses like chemistry and physics forced her to drop out of UC in her second year. She then attended San Jose State College and graduated in 1954 with a degree in occupational therapy. She worked in various hospitals throughout California. She eventually moved to Louisville, Kentucky, where she became the director of occupational therapy at a hospital called Kosair Crippled Children Hospital. They are now called Kosair Charities, so they're not called that anymore, thankfully.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah. So Fossey, while she was living in Kentucky, she met this friend. This friend traveled to Africa and showed Fossey pictures and told her stories of her vacation. And as soon as Fossey saw these photos and heard these stories, she was like, I must go to Africa too. Like, I have to. This is my calling. So in 1963, with the help of her life savings and a bank loan, she was able to travel to Africa. She traveled all over the place, but one of the final sites on her tour was the Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. While at Olduvai Gorge, Fossey met Louis and Mary Leakey. They had an archaeological site there. The Leakeys focused on studying fossils of our ancestors, right? But they also knew the importance of studying our closest relatives, the ape. So Louis Leakey had previously helped another researcher, Jane Goodall, set up a long-term study on chimpanzees and wanted to start something similar for gorillas. Okay. During this time, very little was known about mountain gorillas, which are a subspecies of eastern gorilla. In documentaries and films from the time, gorillas were depicted as violent and brutal. There was tales from hunters suggesting that if you got too close, gorillas would charge to kill. Like, that's what people thought about gorillas in the 60s, which is kind of mind-boggling to me. I didn't realize that people thought that in the 60s, but apparently they did.
Well, not helped by King Kong.
It's not helped by King Kong, not at all.
Although he was a good guy, technically.
Technically. We still have to watch Kong versus...
Yeah, we do.
The other one.
Godzilla.
I was going to say Jumanji, which I was like, that is so wrong. Kong versus Godzilla. There we go. Anyway, so Fossey later pointed to her visit with Dr. Leakey at Olduvai Gorge as a pivotal moment in her life, but we'll get back to that later. After Olduvai Gorge, Fossey met Joan and Alan Root. They were wildlife photographers who were in the Democratic Republic of Congo collecting footage of the Virunga mountain gorillas. So the Virunga Mountain is like a mountain range, and they were studying mountain gorillas in those mountains. And they were taking photos of them for a photographic documentary. And just to say, I'm going to call the Democratic Republic of Congo the Democratic Republic of Congo, even though it was not called that at the time that Fossey was there. I'm also going to call Rwanda, Rwanda, even though that's not necessarily what it was called when she was there. So just bear with me. Okay. So anyway, she meets these roots, these photographers, right, in Congo. They allow Fossey to camp behind their cabin, and after a few days, they took her into the forest to search for gorillas. When they did come upon a group of gorillas, Fossey was able to observe and photograph them, and she developed a firm resolve to come back and study the beautiful creatures. In her book, Gorillas in the Mist, she said, quote, "It was their individuality, combined with their shyness of their behavior, that remained the most captivating impression of this first encounter with the greatest of the great apes. I left Kabara with reluctance, but with never a doubt that I would somehow return to learn more about the gorillas of the misted mountains." So yes, sadly, her first trip to Africa to the Virungas came to an end, and she had to return to Kentucky, of all places.
Ugh, no gorillas there.
There's no gorillas there, okay? While living in Kentucky, she wrote and published several articles about her experiences in Africa. She was reunited with Dr. Leakey in 1966 when he was in Louisville on a lecture tour. She attended the lecture, she showed Leakey her writings on the travels and her interactions with the gorillas, and Leakey was so impressed that he encouraged Fossey to head up a long-term field project to study gorillas in Africa. And of course, Fossey was on board. What I find bonkers about this is this woman has no qualifications, and this guy is like, I'm a doctor. I'm an archaeologist. I'm like ready to like just set you up with a place in Africa. Like, because he was going to set her up with this whole thing.
That's similar to what happened with the dolphins.
Right. Exactly.
The lady who, was doing stuff with the dolphins, she wasn't like a marine biologist. She was just someone who really liked animals.
Right. And there's a whole element of this that I couldn't get into because this is already a little bit longer of a topic, where this particular doctor, Dr. Leakey, who set up Jane Goodall, he talks about how primatology is specifically like a woman's science and how the best type of people to get into primatology are women with very little qualifications, because they're just so much easier to like kind of adapt and learn into that role. And there's like a sexism element there, but I'm like, I can't, this stuff is going to get wild. I can't necessarily get into that element, which is also wild. But if you're interested in that, you should research it because it's kind of cool. Well, not cool, but it's interesting to think about primatology as having that kind of like sexist undertone. Anyway, so he's like, Fauci, you need a long-term research project in Africa. You need it. And she's like, okay, I need it. And it took Leakey about 8 months before he secured funding to send Fauci to study. And during that time, she focused on learning Swahili and studying as much as she could on mountain gorillas. She has no education in primatology or gorillas or anything. So she decided to study then. Okay. So then she heads back to Africa in 1966. She arrives in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and with the help of her friend Alan Root, who is that photographer who took her on her first trip to encounter gorillas, she was able to get the permit she needed to work in the Virunga mountain range, and he helped her recruit her crew that would live with her at the camp. Root also helped her set up camp and taught her the basics of gorilla tracking. She's just like moves there. She has no idea how to track gorillas, whatever. So you can sense my feelings.
I feel like you need more than just the basics of gorilla tracking. That's just me. I'd be like, I need to be like an expert in gorilla tracking before you send me out there.
Right. Her crew initially was 2 guys and like a couple porters to like carry her stuff and her.
Those porters were like, how the hell did we get chosen to be on this trip?
Yeah, I probably would not have taken that job. So yeah, he taught her the basics of tracking, and then he left, and Fauci was left with her crew in the Kibara Meadow, where she would conduct her research. She lived in a 7 by 10 foot tent, which served as her bedroom, her bathroom, her office, and the place where her clothes dried.
Wait, the tent was her bathroom?
That's
maybe it's a fancy tent, but it's like, dude, you have the whole outside.
Right. Food was limited, okay, and especially food variety. She wasn't like eating fresh fruits and vegetables. She was mostly eating canned food and potatoes. Once a month, she would hike down the mountains and make a 2-hour car ride into a village to restock her pantry. A big player in the early days of Fauci's tracking was an experienced gorilla tracker named Senwekwi. He actually joined her later, and he worked with the Roots back in 1963. So he showed up to her camp and he taught Fauci most of what she came to know about tracking. It was with his help that she was eventually able to identify 3 distinct gorilla groups in the area that she was living. Initially, the gorillas would flee upon her approach, but after observing them from a distance, over time, she gained their acceptance. She put them at ease by imitating scratching, feeding, and copying their vocalization. Her time in Kibara was short, no more than 7 months. There was a really complicated political situation happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo at the time, to put it lightly. There's this whole, like, she gets kidnapped and had to escape saga that I couldn't include. Eventually, she's reunited with Dr. Leakey in Kenya, and they agree that she would not return to Congo, but she would instead continue her research in the Virunga mountain range on the Rwandan side. So the Virunga mountain range is at like a very unique location where the Democratic Republic of Congo meets Rwanda and Uganda. So these 3 nations kind of like are around this range. And she was originally studying the gorillas in Congo, and then she moves to the eastern side of the mountain range and studies the gorillas in Rwanda. Okay? So we're in Rwanda now, 1967. She establishes the Karasoke Research Center in Rwanda. Kare is for the first 4 letters of Mount Karisimbi that overlooked her camp from the south, and Soke is for the last 4 letters of Mount Visoke, which were the slopes to the north. So Karasoke is the name of her research center. At Karasoke, she was able to identify 4 distinct groups of gorillas in 1968. Her tactics for getting close to gorillas is now known as habituation. This is actually something that people use to this day to kind of familiarize themselves with ape colonies. And in 1984, she wrote in the BBC, quote, "I'm an inhibited persona, and I felt that the gorillas were somewhat inhibited as well, so I imitated their natural, normal behavior, like feeding, munching on celery stalks, or scratching myself. And like I said earlier, she would mimic the vocalization, she would beat on her chest. She realized that walking or standing upright near gorillas increased their apprehension, but she was able to get quite close to them if she knuckle walked. She would also chew on celery when she was near the groups, and it kind of would draw them closer. So basically, by mimicking their behaviors, this habituation, she was able to get closer, which allowed them to do like really close, in-depth research on these gorillas.
Wow, just by chewing a celery stalk? The gorillas were like, what you got there?
Right. So when we open up our research center in Rwanda, we'll just bring lots of celery.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly.
I should do it.
Yeah. In 1968, National Geographic sent a photographer named Bob Campbell to photograph her work. And in 1970, she was on the cover of National Geographic. This was her first opportunity to tell the world about the real lives of mountain gorillas. This is a quote from Fauci from that National Geographic article. Quote, "The gorilla is one of the most malign animals in the world. After more than 2,000 hours of direct observation, I can account for less than 5 minutes of what might be called aggressive behavior." End quote. So Campbell's photography and Fauci and her writings on the gorillas launched her into instant celebrity and helped change the image of gorillas from dangerous beasts to gentile creatures, while also drawing attention to their plights. Okay. Before we move on, we have to talk a little bit about Fauci's personality, who she was as a human, and how she interacted with those that she worked and researched with. According to those who lived and worked with Fauci at Karasoke Research Center, she provided little companionship or comfort and was not an easy person to live or work with. She preferred to be alone. I guess there's nothing wrong with that. That's probably why she was like fine with like going to live in the jungle by herself. Mm-hmm. But they said that she could be charming one minute and hostile the next. Days would go by where she wouldn't communicate with anyone except for sending handwritten notes. Kelly Stewart, who is a primatologist and who worked with Fauci for many years and was initially her student, said, quote, "She was a hard person to be friends with. She demanded complete loyalty, but you never knew whether she was going to love or hate you that day. She could be very charming, a lot of fun, and very supportive. And then she could turn on you."
Wow. Okay. Sounds like a character.
Sounds like a character. This personality of hers played I would say, an important role in how Fauci addressed conservation tactics at the research center. While at the Karasoke Research Center, Fauci realized how many threats gorillas faced from poachers and cattle herders. Though gorillas weren't usually the targets of these people, they often became ensnared in traps intended for other animals like antelope or buffalo. Mm-hmm. For context, at the time, only 250 mountain gorillas were left in the Virunga Mountains. Fauci believed that only drastic measures could save the species. So there's these animals are still endangered to this day, but they were really endangered then. Fauci took it upon herself to fight back against poachers, cattle herders, and local Rwandans. According to Stewart, quote, "When I first got to Karasoke Research Center, Fauci was mercurial, but she was already angry. She was in warrior mode and fighting mode. Her love for gorillas and her hatred of poachers really colored her behavior, and some people think it eventually got in the way of rational management of the research center." I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with being anti-poaching.
Yeah.
But Fauci called her approach to conservation, quote, active conservation, believing that without immediate action, other long-term conservation goals would be useless since there would be nothing left to save. Okay, I'm following. But what is active conservation? What does that mean?
Did she start poaching poachers?
She didn't not.
Okay.
On one instance, Fauci shot several cattle dead as a deterrent for cattle farmers bringing their herds into the mountains. So with that, like, cattle herders were bringing their herds into the areas where the gorillas naturally were habitating, and then the gorillas would leave or die because they came in contact with the herders. So that's why she hated cattle herders. So she would do things like spray paint their cattle or shoot them dead to make herders not bring their cattle into the park anymore. She would also wear face masks and pretend to use black magic so locals would think she was a witch and be scared off. Some locals even referred to her as the Witch of the Virungas.
Okay, I mean, that's
Others,
like not hurting anyone, I guess.
Well, here we go.
Yet.
Other stories say that she would capture poachers and torture them. Michelle A. Rodriguez, who is a biological anthropologist at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, wrote an incredible...
Champagne.
Did I say campaign?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I work in social media. I run campaigns all day. Urbana-Champaign. Excuse me. Anyway, so Michelle A. Rodriguez wrote an incredible article on ladyscience.com. The title is "It's Time to Stop Lionizing Dian Fossey as a Conservation Hero." Rodriguez was teaching a course on primatology at Wake Forest University and was provided with research materials from one of Fauci's biographers, a man named Harold Hayes. In these materials, she and her students discovered a letter Fauci wrote in 1976 to another primatologist, Dr. Richard Wrangham at Harvard. In the letter, Fauci criticized Wrangham's less controversial conservation efforts and encouraged him to use, quote, active methods. Here's a quote from Rodriguez's article. Quote, "In chilling detail, Fauci described how she and her associates captured and stripped a poacher, laid him spread eagle on the ground, and lashed his genitals with nettles. After that, she engaged a, quote, black magic routine, which combined sleeping pills and ether with her knowledge of local cultural beliefs in black magic as a form of psychological torture. She didn't describe these actions as mistakes driven by anger or revenge. Rather, she encouraged Dr. Wrangham to emulate her methods and promote them in future conservation talks as a successful tactic to deter poaching and encroachment of cattle grazing. End quote.
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, the whole thing sounded a little weird when you know that she's American and she's going into this other culture and is like then trying to, I mean, obviously like the animals do need to be, you know, conserved, but I feel like there has to be a happy medium.
Right. Another telling of this horrific story comes from Amy Vedder, who is an ecologist and primatologist who worked with Fauci at Karasoke. A journalist named Tunku Veradarajan wrote an article in the Washington Journal called, quote, Giants of the Jungle. And this is from that article. Amy Vedder and her husband, Bill Weber, discuss Fauci with great frankness and detail in their book, In the Kingdom of Gorillas, in which there is a gruesome depiction of an occasion where she pistol-whipped a man suspected of poaching on her reserve and then supervised his prolonged torture at her camp, including the rubbing of stinging nettles on his penis and testicles. Doctors Weber and Vedder wrote, quote, he was then given enough Valium to send him into a state of extreme disorientation. When he came to, Dian told him that she had taken his mind away, then given it back. Next time, she would keep it. End quote.
Wow. That's twisted.
It's twisted. And as you can imagine, her tactics were not popular with many people, especially the locals. Mm-hmm. As you can probably imagine. Just like put the pieces together, folks. But Fauci's cynicism and distrust of any other method other than her own peaked in 1977. But this starts a couple years back. It starts with a gorilla named Digit, who Fauci met in 1967 when he was approximately 5 years old. Digit lived in group 4 of the gorillas being researched at the park. He got his name because he had a damaged finger on his right hand. He also had no playmates in his age group, so Fauci said they were drawn to each other because they were loners. Okay, mm-hmm. She really loved Digit. Digit was also part of that famous Nat Geo photo shoot that Fauci was in. the one that like made her super famous. He became the official representative of the park's mountain gorillas. He appeared on posters and in travel bureaus all over the world. Sadly, on December 31st, 1977, Digit was killed by poachers. He was defending his group, allowing them to escape safely, but he was stabbed multiple times and his head and hands were severed. His limbs were reportedly sold as trinkets for about $20. It's very sad.
Also, it's like, that's how the poachers were stabbing the gorillas? That seems a little too close.
Right. And
20, I mean.
I know. There's a lot involved in this that I learned about gorillas and also learned about poaching that I don't really even want to talk about because it's actually really upsetting. But it's so dark and sad, and it's also complicated because it's not as easy as all poachers are evil. It's not like somebody wakes up one day and says, I'm going to be a poacher and kill animals. Like, that's not how it works. Do you know what I mean? There's systems in place that create this job, that create this industry. Okay. I'm not saying that poachers are innocent, but I'm also not saying, but I'm also saying that there are things that create this environment for this kind of industry to grow.
Yeah.
Anyway, so here's a quote from Fauci in another National Geographic article about Digit being killed. Quote, "The mutilated body, head, and hands hacked off for grisly trophies lay limp in the brush like a bloody sack. For me, this killing was probably the saddest event in all my years of sharing the daily lives of mountain gorillas." As a result, Fauci began drinking and smoking heavily, and she spiraled into a terrible depression. 6 months after Digit was killed, there was another attack on Digit's family group in Group 4. 2 other adults were killed and 1 infant named Quelly. One of those killed was the dominant silverback leader of the group. His name was Uncle Bert. Because of Uncle Bert's death, the group disbanded and dispersed, and they didn't live together anymore. That's kind of how gorillas work, you know? Fauci then openly declared war on the poachers. She used Digit's celebrity and tragic death to gain attention and support for gorilla conservation, but most of the money went into other forms of conservation rather than directly tackling poaching, which is what Fauci wanted. Ian Redman, who was a conservationist who worked with Fauci at Karasoke, said, quote, "For a long time, there was a real falling out between Dion and the other conservationist because she was in the forest and there was no sign of any change. Poachers were operating, snares had been set, gorillas were in danger, but she was seeing money being spent on education and films." End quote. The other conservationists at the time were playing a long game. They were aiming to raise awareness of the gorillas and to encourage the local government to keep their habitat intact rather than using it to raise cattle, etc. But Fauci believed that this was the wrong approach. She wanted direct action, and she wanted to see poachers imprisoned and punished. She could not see that these people who were part of the problem could also ever be a part of the solution. She didn't think that was possible. According to Redmond, she, quote, derided the efforts to convert poachers into farmers, and her mistrust of the Rwandan people only increased. Amy Vetter, who we talked about before, she arrived at Karasoke 2 months after Digit was killed, and she says Fauci did not believe any Rwandan was sincere or smart enough to help her efforts. She, quote, shut them out entirely. She was entirely dismissive of them, end quote. The thing is conservation is obviously very complicated, and I'm going to really boil this down and oversimplify this. But what Fauci didn't realize was that conservation is a huge collaboration process, right? Where there are times when you need to work with those people that you might view as your enemies, such as the local authorities and even the poachers themselves. Vetter became part of a different conservation group called the Mountain Gorilla Project, which was founded in 1979. And it was a collaboration between many organizations to save Rwanda's remaining gorillas. The key to their approach was working with locals to change their attitudes towards gorillas and focus on ecotourism instead. So instead of corporal punishment, it was to actually go into communities and have local direct action in the communities and educate communities about the importance of their environment and the gorillas that lived there, rather than just sending all the men to prison. 2 different approaches. Which one is right? I think, I'm pretty sure the Mountain Gorilla Project didn't torture poachers. So that's That's just the first differentiation. Yeah, anyway, but Falsey didn't stay in Rwanda forever. She moved back to the US in 1980, where she published her book, Gorillas in the Mist, in 1983. It's an account of her years with the gorillas, right? And it underscored the need for conservation, blah, blah, blah. There was a movie adaptation. It was released in 1988, and it starred Sigourney Weaver, and it was nominated for 5 Academy Awards.
I was going to say, I know that movie, like when you said the name.
Right, I have seen it. I think I've seen it too. But Falsey did return to Rwanda. Sadly, in 1985, Diane Falsey was found murdered in her cabin in her research center.
By who?
She was struck twice on the head and face with a machete.
Damn.
Her entire staff was arrested, but all were released aside from a tracker who supposedly hanged himself in prison. But people don't think he was the one who did it. He probably just experienced really bad stuff in prison. Mm-hmm. Later, Rwandan courts tried and convicted a man named Wayne McGuire in absentia for her murder, claiming he wanted to steal the manuscript for the sequel to her book. But by this time, McGuire was already back in the United States, and there was no extradition treaty between the two countries, so he never was sent back. If he were to go back to Rwanda for whatever reason, his punishment would be death by shooting. So I don't think he's ever going to go back. But people don't think that it was him. Mm-hmm. But the problem is like to this day, the murder was unsolved. The crime scene was poorly handled. Evidence was lost, destroyed, trampled on, all of the normal reasons why crimes like this don't get solved. But there's one clear aspect of her murder in that it was someone had ransacked her cabin, though took nothing of value. What does that mean? I don't know. Some explanations for her murder. People jump immediately to poachers, but most people say that it's highly unlikely that poachers would have killed her because poachers are local hunters, and they've done this trade for decades, right? And they use the money that they earn to provide for their families. Yes, they're participating in an illegal trade, but that would mean that they would want to stay out of the limelight, right? Like they're not trying to murder one of the most famous researchers in Rwanda, especially a white researcher. You know what I mean? Like the eyes of the world were on her, just like the eyes of the world were on Jane Goodall, Yeah. I don't think poachers would want to be killing her. And according to Amy Vedder, quote, "The last thing they wanted was a confrontation. I strongly believe, though no one has evidence, it was not poachers. Poachers were rural people with few means and did not know the camp well enough to be a threat to her." End quote.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Others believe it was a local gold smuggler. The research center, like I said before, is on the border of Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Uganda. It's the ideal route for smugglers. And there were some reports that Falsey was aware of this trade and the smugglers wanted to get rid of the evidence, but it could never be proved. One thing we do know for sure is that Falsey slept with a pistol by her bed because she knew the potential danger she was in, either from these gold smugglers or locals who she tortured and pissed off, or whatever. Maybe she was
her
just
own
manic.
team.
Yeah, exactly. Sadly, she died, but she was laid to rest in the graveyard behind her cabin, among her gorilla friends, next to her beloved Digit.
Oh, that's nice.
Yes. I'm going to end on 2 quotes, just to wrap it up. Mm-hmm. The first is from the Vera Darjan's article from the Washington Journal. Quote, "There can be no denying Falsey's path-breaking achievements, and had it not been for her and for the attention she attracted to the cause of the mountain gorillas, it is possible that we might today have been talking of those animals in the past tense. But Falsey was also a racist alcoholic who regarded her gorillas as better than the African people who lived around them. Her anthropomorphization of the apes was matched by her increasing belittlement of the area's natives. Arguably the world's first eco-colonialist, she habitually referred to the Rwandans as, quote, and I'm not going to say it, WOGS, end quote, never in all her time recruited a single black African as a researcher, and even burned the crops of neighboring peasants whom she suspected let their cattle graze in the reserve, end quote. And the last quote I will end on is from the Michelle A. Rodriguez article on Science Mom. I would really recommend everybody checking this out. It's so much more in depth than I could get into in the short time that I have with you tonight.
Send me the link. We can put in the episode details.
Yes, will do. And this is a quote from that article. Quote, Reviews of Harold Hayes' 1990 biography, The Dark Romance of Dian Fossey, describes Fossey as, quote, one of the last white colonialists, end quote, and acknowledged that her actions were rooted in racism. The image of Fossey, a white American woman, whipping and torturing black African poachers is evocative of the behavior of white slaveholders in the American South. It is appalling enough to think of that behavior occurring in the 1850s. There is no way we can explain Fossey's behavior in the 1970s as the product of a, quote, different time. Yet, almost 3 decades later, the romantic notion of a noble martyr who died for her devotion to the guerrillas prevails, and these terrifying actions are often described as simply unorthodox methods. Perhaps these truths are softened due to fears that the reality of this legacy would harm guerrilla conservation efforts, but memorializing her as a martyr and patron saint of guerrilla conservation demands that we forget the cruel acts she advocated for and performed. End quote.
Yeah, I mean, she sounds pretty messed up.
So that's the
All right.
Gorilla
I mean,
Watcher.
what's up with Jane Goodall? What's her? Does she do anything? Should I be suspicious of her too? What's her deal?
I went down such a rabbit hole. I could talk a lot more about some of this stuff, specifically like the sexism element, and like the eco-colonialist element. But it's really obviously difficult to talk about something so dense in 20 minutes. Like I didn't even really get to talk about what she did research-wise, you know, with the gorillas, because there's just the fact that she was murdered. That was a surprise. The fact that she was this insane racist torturer was a surprise. I was just like, oh God, I got to get through this.
Maybe we need another podcast called Podcasts in the Mist.
Maybe we do.
You know, a gorilla themed podcast, something to throw out there.
There we go. There we go. Would you listen to that, listeners? Would you listen to our podcast in the mist?
If you need a good name for a podcast, let me know. I'll workshop some things for you, because I truly enjoy it.
She's really good at the whole naming and the titling and the description writing. So Grace is your girl.
Shout out to idioms.com.
Oh, she's good.
So, well, I guess, I mean, I don't really know how to pivot to our ending here. We'll put that article link in the details below. And also below, you will find a link to our Twitter at The Good Eve Girls.
And our Instagram, The Good Evening Girls.
And TikTok, The Good Eve Girls.
Stop by. You know, we don't always talk about sad topics. We did have...
My topic was good.
Your topic was great.
Remember the couple they met because their guide dogs were friends?
Let's just end thinking about that couple, okay? Let's not think about Fousey. Let's think about...
Shout out to them.
Doggies that work really hard and couples that fall in love because their dogs are working really hard.
All right. Well, I guess that's a good note to end on as any.
Let's do it. Let's end.
All right. Goodbye, listeners.
Goodbye.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Goodbye.